These PS Plus price increases are absolutely insane. Here's how your PS5 is about to become the best PS2 of all time, and here's a PlayStation player's take on Starfield. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to PSReady. This is the weekend update here on the channel. I hope you're having a great weekend playing some games. There's some big ones coming out on Xbox this weekend. I'm sure none of you are playing that, or you might be console agnostic like me at the end of the day and you are playing it, but we also have awesome stuff like Armored Core 6 going on, and Baldur's Gate 3 is right around the corner. So nobody is really wanting for games. That is the point of this intro. So the first news story I wanted to talk about today is how your PS5 is about to become the best PS2 of all time. And let me explain this. So right now you can get some PS2 games that you can emulate on your PlayStation 5. You can get them through PS Plus Premium and you can buy them a la carte. But it's actually using the PS4's emulator that was created for the a la carte PS2 games that were available on the PS4. And for one reason or another, that emulator just doesn't work all that well on the PlayStation 5. There are frame rate issues, there are resolution issues, there are some issues with trophies not popping. It really needs some work, and it seems like Sony has gotten to the point with this where they're just saying, screw it, we're starting from scratch and rebuilding the PlayStation 2 emulator. Now, the source on this is Mystic, who's a really big PlayStation YouTuber. He covers other news in the gaming industry as well, but he said he's heard it on such good authority that he feels totally safe talking about it. And to me personally, this doesn't even seem like something Sony would announce. It seems like the way this would be announced is with a big batch of PS2 games released, and then Sony says, yeah, the reason we were holding back on releasing more of these quickly is because we had to work on our emulator behind the scenes. Now, you guys already know I'm of two minds on this. I'm happy that Sony is going back to the drawing board with this emulator and fixing it to get PS2 games running better on the PlayStation 5. I just personally wish they would invest that time and energy into making a PS3 emulator that works on the PlayStation 5. Nothing against the PS2, but the farther I get away from that generation, the less and less I find myself going back to it. And the ironic thing is, pretty much every huge first party or second party game from that generation ended up getting a collection on PS3 where the games could upscale to 1080p, they ran at smoother frame rates, and they even got things like better textures and more content. And those collections that Sony used to do were awesome. They would only cost around 30 bucks. They would have stuff like Eco and Shadow of the Colossus paired up. You could get the first 4 God of War games, God of War 2, God of War Chains of Olympus, and Ghost of Sparta all packaged together, and those PSP games upscaled really well. They of course had the Metal Gear Solid collection on the PlayStation 4, which was pretty similar, that had Metal Gear Solid 2, Metal Gear Solid 3, and Peace Walker. There was the Jack and Daxter collection, there was the Ratchet and Clank collection. All of these collections eventually made their way over to Vita, but the point is, if they just worked on emulating PS3 games, they could kill 2 birds with 1 stone and have those collections be emulatable, and they wouldn't even have to include these in PS Plus Extra or Premium. There's people like me who grew up with the PS3 in middle and high school and have extreme nostalgia for these games that would definitely buy them a la carte, but if they wanted to be really cool, they could go back and do what Xbox does, which is give you access to games you bought digitally back in the day. Because the PS3 was the first time Sony really put headway into making sure games were available day and date digitally, and it was really cool back then because if you bought games on the PlayStation Store versus going and getting a disc, they actually passed off the savings of printing a disc to you, so you could get games for 50 bucks instead of 60, and I took advantage of that when I was in college by trading in some old disc games from the PS2 and Xbox generation and getting PlayStation Network gift cards, and then I would put them in and get that $10 bonus, and it was awesome. Nowadays, not only are we paying more with games costing 70 bucks, but there's complete parity in price between disc and digital. It just seems like as Sony has gotten more successful since the PS3 generation, they've gotten a little more stingy. I've talked about that with their sales strategy and stuff like that, but overall, I would really like for them to just do a PS3 emulator. And it is good that they are working on a PS2 emulator, even though they already have one, because it shows that they actually care about this stuff. They want to make sure that games will look and run better on the PlayStation 5 than they currently do. But I'm still just like, why is there no emulator, right? On PC, you can emulate every PS3 game now. There were difficult ones back in the day, like Metal Gear Solid 4 and Uncharted 3. All of that has since been fixed, and it's gotten to the point where you can play Metal Gear Solid 4 pretty much at 60 FPS 720p on an ROG Ally, which is a handheld. So to say that the PS5 isn't capable of running these games, I'm just calling BS on that, and I want them to invest the time and energy into it. Because games like Infamous 1, 2, Festival of Blood, Resistance 1, 2, and 3, the original Uncharted games, even though we did get the upscaled re-release. I'd still like to go back and play my PS3 versions. I still own Metal Gear Solid 4, which allegedly is thankfully going to come out in the Master Collection. There's like a huge list of PS3 games, like Layer even, which ended up getting an update that made it a better game, that just don't work on the PlayStation 5 right now. And I know that PS Plus Premium comes with the streaming of these games. It's just not good enough. It doesn't work right, it's blocky, and it makes games that are running at 720p on a 4K TV with zero upscaling look and run even worse than they already did, because the way you're streaming this is directly from a PlayStation 3. I think one reason that Sony ended up having to go back to the drawing board on their emulator instead of just updating it is that the way it's built, when you buy a PS2 game on the PlayStation Store for your PS5, you're not just downloading the ROM and then the built-in emulator on the console runs it. They package in the emulator with every single game. So when you buy one copy of the game, the emulator is included with that. And then when you buy another game, you get a new special version of the emulator that might fix some issues with that game. It's like the worst way to do things, right? Like, so I understand why they're building out a new emulator. I just hope when they finish it, they either move on or finish the work they've already done on the inevitable PS3 emulator. Because, you know, there's a huge drought of first-party content right now, and I know we have great third-party content coming to the PS5, but one way to mitigate that back in the day, specifically with the Vita, was dropping huge batches of PS1 games on the PlayStation Store every week, and that was something fun to get excited about. So yeah, long story short, Sony is building out a new PS2 emulator, so if all goes well, we'll be getting a huge floodgate opening of PS2 games added in both PS Plus Premium and to buy a la carte, and hopefully, like they've been doing with other PS1, PSP, and PS2 classics, if you've already bought these games before on other PlayStation consoles, I really hope that you're just able to download them from your account. But all signs point to that actually being the case, because that's what you're already able to do, so things are pretty good there. But speaking of PS Plus, we got to get into this next news story, because I think this might be one of the worst moves Sony has ever made. So yesterday, out of nowhere, they basically announced that all 3 tiers of PS Plus are going up in price next year, and these are some pretty dramatic increases in pricing. So right now, PS Plus Essential costs $60 a year, PS Plus Extra costs $100 a year, and PS Plus Premium costs $120 a year. And starting in September, PS Plus Essential is getting a $20 price hike to $80 a year, PS Plus Extra is getting a $35 price hike to $135 a year, and PS Plus Premium is getting a $40 increase all the way up to $160 a year. And that one is extremely egregious. I have been saying since it came out that PS Plus Premium is just not worth it for $120 a year. They promise extra things like game demos, which used to be free back in the day. They also give you access to streaming games from the cloud, which, as I've said multiple times on this channel, is not nearly good enough on a decent network, and definitely not good enough on a powerful network. And of course, they've also been giving out classic games from the PS1, PSP, and PS2 era, but that's been a total drip feed, and the games they're choosing to give out to people aren't ever really that good. There's been a few standouts, but overall, I'd say the vast majority of the games they've been giving out have been lackluster at best and just straight up bad at worst. So for them to increase the price by $40 all the way up to $180 for a service that's benefits barely work, if ever, and also don't actually give us what is promised a lot of the time, I think that's not only ridiculous, it's egregious, and it's just not right. The same thing goes for PS Plus Extra. Charging $35 more for this library of games is absolutely insane, especially when you consider that before PS Plus Extra launched, there was a thing called the PS Plus Collection, which gave you a collection of games that are basically all included in PS Plus Extra, but the difference is you get to keep those games forever as long as you're paying for PS Plus. And as we've seen, Sony is totally happy to remove first-party games whenever they want from the PS Plus Extra library. PS Plus Essential is the one where it's like, yeah, it is that they're increasing the price by $20. $80 a year for that service seems like quite a bit of money, but it's kind of not really that egregious just because it hasn't gotten a price increase pretty much ever, and they've kind of put their money where their mouth is in giving us good games every single month. This month was terrible, probably the worst time to announce this price increase, because getting Saints Row was just a slap in the face type of situation. And this also raises the stakes quite a bit for them to make sure that literally every month is a banger month, because now people are going going to be pissed that they're spending extra money, and if they get worse games after this price increase happens, then yeah, it's really going to cause some problems for Sony from an optics perspective. But the one thing that kind of is coming back to bite Sony in this situation, I would say, is the whole upgrade system for PS Plus Essential and Extra. Back when this was coming out, you could basically upgrade really cheaply from Essential to Extra, so people were stacking years and years and years of PS Plus Essential, and then it was upgrading them to Extra free of charge. So a lot of those people aren't going to see this price increase, I would say, but still, it doesn't make sense to punish the people who do things the right way and pay either month to month or buy these 1-year gift cards. So if you stacked up years of PS Plus, you will eventually have to pay more money to get it every month, but you can rest easy knowing that what you already have stacked isn't going to increase in price until that time expires. I mean, they've already seen blowback from this. They said they're disappointed with the sales of the PlayStation 5, and we've all talked about how that comes down to the fact that there's been literally zero to no first-party output of actual PlayStation 5 games. And also, this is just such a bad time to nickel and dime people when gas is like still super expensive, going to the grocery store is super expensive, having entertainment go up in price for arbitrary reasons by this much money, like 20 bucks a month at minimum, going all the way up to 40. It's a bad look overall. And I'm a huge Sony fan, but I'm not going to sit here and defend their bottom line. Like, this just sucks. And for the last news story today, I'm going to talk about one of the bigger releases of 2023 that unfortunately is not on PlayStation. Yes, I'm going to give you a PlayStation gamer's take on Starfield. Bethesda was kind enough to give me a review key for the game just because Ray and I do videos on each other's channels, and I have sunk quite a few hours into it at this point. I've had it for a couple of weeks and I really enjoy the game. But the reason I was so excited is because the summer of 2007, my friends and I all got Fallout 3's Game of the Year edition at the same time, and we lugged our TVs to the same house, and we spent like an entire summer weekend playing literally every inch of that game. And ever since I did that, I've just been a die-hard Bethesda Game Studios fan. So leading up to Starfield, when I saw that huge deep dive with Ray at the Xbox Summer event, I was just like so sold immediately. To me, it looks like Fallout or Skyrim in space, which is not an insult in any way. As you can tell, I love those games, but the difference is it's just on such a bigger scale than anything they've ever done before. And it has a tone of hope, which I think is really cool. Like, the music is really hopeful. It almost sounds like if you put all of Fallout 4's music into a major key. So you feel like happy when you're playing it. You want to explore. You don't feel like stressed or scared like you do in some of the darker sections of Fallout 4. And there's just a lot to unpack with this game. It's not really open world in the sense that like Fallout 4 is a huge map where you walk around and discover new objects. You pretty much can go anywhere you want in the galaxy from the beginning of the game because it hands you a spaceship immediately and basically says go nuts. But this is one of the first times since Fallout 3 where I wanted to experience the main quest storyline, so I really focused on that and building out my ship and building out my skills and everything like that. And unlike Fallout 4, it makes you kind of specialize into one sort of skill tree. You have to be one type of character instead of being a jack of all trades, which I really ended up liking. Mechanically, they've overhauled pretty much everything. You can effectively play this game in third person now. There's like a far out view, there's an over the shoulder view, and then of course you do have first person. The animations look great on all the guns. It doesn't quite feel as good as something like, I don't know, Outriders, for example, or Destiny 2, but it doesn't feel like Fallout anymore, which Fallout 4, when you're not using VATS, I would not call anywhere close to a good shooter, but they got halfway there, I would say, with 76, and this is the full next step into gun combat for a Bethesda game, and I think they absolutely knocked it out of the park, especially when you start getting upgrades to things like the jetpack, where you can boost around, and I played in third person during that, and it just felt really dynamic and cool, and the AI is a lot better than it used to be. There's still moments where they'll kind of just like sit still when you're right next to them and not like attack you. You can just shoot them in the back and stuff like that, but there's tons of new animations, like you can blow up their backpacks, you can shoot their helmets and they'll kind of suffocate. There's crazy things you can do like that that are all huge improvements over what we've seen before. What I will say is hit or miss for me is the worlds. New Atlantis on Jemison, which Jemison is the planet, New Atlantis is the city. When you get there, it's not really that impressive. It just looks like that Society If meme to me, and it's inspired, right? Like the art of it is cool. It just, when you're walking around, it feels like a city on Earth, which I guess makes sense because it's in Jemison, which I guess is like Earth 2 because Earth is destroyed. But then when you get to places like Neon that are huge Night City style cities, that looks a lot better. And then there are even smaller cities on places like Mars that totally reminded me of movies like Alien Resurrection or Event Horizon. So the geographic diversity in this game is absolutely nuts. I saw the controversy where people were like, oh, you can't run around an entire planet. That's crazy. There's like 1,000 planets in this game, and running around a planet that's that's entirely empty because it doesn't have survivable atmosphere. Not really that interesting to me personally. I'd rather explore new planets and kind of spend a little bit of time on each one instead of spending a ton of time on one planet, because if I wanted to do that, I could just be playing Fallout 4 or Skyrim. I also experienced like zero bugs when I was playing this. There's nothing like characters floating away. There's no graphical glitches. I didn't warp into any walls. There were some weird things, like when I was in a conversation, my companion would kind of like hover over the shoulder of the person I was talking to, but that's stuff that happens in any open world RPG, so I'm not really gonna knock them for that. The game feels extremely polished. But yeah, my only negatives are that you can't really explore, because when you click into a planet, you can already see every landing space that's on it, so there's no sense of like real discovery. The discovery comes from finding new characters and side quests. I really enjoyed every aspect of this game other than that, and I cannot wait to sink more time into it as soon as I'm done making these videos today. The real thing as a PlayStation fan that really bums me out is that Sony doesn't make games like this. I feel like they totally could, right? Like, they've got huge studios that are extremely talented. They've got the best talent in the industry. I wish that they would get kind of a few of their studios together and say, Guerrilla, you're really good at making open worlds. Insomniac, you're really good at making combat. Naughty Dog, you're really good at doing face capture and animations, and just have them all work on one game together where they each take a third of that game and kind of combine it at the end and make the ultimate open world RPG. I feel like they could blow a Bethesda style RPG out of the water doing something like that, but obviously the thing holding that back is A, budget, and B, Sony knowing what works, right? Like, they know that if they make a third person action oriented RPG that has good combat and a nice story, that it's probably going to sell tens of millions of copies, and that's a fair thing for them to do. So yeah, at the end of the day, it feels like a Bethesda Game Studios RPG, for better or worse. Like, you know what you're getting into. It's going to feel like a huge step up over Fallout 4 because they've just taken what they've already done in other games and done more of it and better. But if you're sitting there having FOMO about it, I think you're fine with games like Horizon Forbidden West or newer experiences like Baldur's Gate 3, which is going to be on PlayStation 5 first. Like, there are other options out there, but if you're kind of chasing that dragon of like getting the ultimate space experience where you get to be anywhere you want in the galaxy and have guns and like do pirate stuff, or you can be like a persuasion type dude or a trader, there's like millions of different things you can do in this game. I think you're going to be hard pressed to get it out of any game other than Starfield. I mean, No Man's Sky does some things a little bit better, like being able to seamlessly jump off a planet with your ship and then go to like a freighter. They also just added in cinematic dogfights, but even with all those new features, it's just not the same. Like, my go-to space game from now on is going to be Starfield, and I really hope eventually Sony adds a game like this to their roster. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got for you today. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Remember to subscribe and set your notifications to all if you haven't already. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.